I'm Nicole Casperson, Fintech journalist, and this is What the Fintech. As a journalist who has covered the finance sector over the last 5 years, I've had the opportunity to interview and engage with some of the best minds in the space. The media landscape is changing, and financial services is grabbing the attention of a more diversified audience than ever before. As a member of that growing demographic, I will provide direct access to the inner workings of a complex industry while bringing an unconventional perspective to news coverage. Leaving big bank earning reports to the boring traditional media firms, I'll focus on the tech-savvy apps, digital investing platforms, challenger banks, and payment giants to drive relevant content that looks forward to disruption instead of fearing it. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of What the Fintech, a podcast for fintech professionals who want to shape the future of our industry with innovation and inclusion. I'm your host, Nicole Casperson, and today I'm sitting down with Amy Kadomatsu, CEO of ComplySci. ComplySci is a regtech that helps identify conflicts of interest arising from employee activities, including personal trading, gifts, and entertainment. Also things like political contributions, outside business affiliations, and other code of ethics violations. So they're doing a lot, and it's very cool. Amy took over the role as CEO in October 2020. I'm so excited to dive into Amy's personal background while she makes talking about compliance actually fun. Amy, welcome to What the Fintech.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here.
Yes, so happy to have you here. We've had a couple of conversations before, so I'm so excited to finally have one on the record that folks get to listen to and get to know you. First and foremost, where are you working from? You're working from home. You have these awesome plants in your background. How are you doing today?
I do. So thank you for asking. So yes, I'm working from home. I never knew that I could grow and keep plants until the pandemic happened. And apparently they really love all of the hot air that I'm spewing in this little corner because they seem to be thriving. Even though sometimes I forget to water them, I think I've also chosen some plants that withstand abuse. So that's good too.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of also became a little bit of a plant like connoisseur myself
I see.
because of the pandemic, right? Yeah, I mean, also my partner has been for like a while, but my plants here are looking all right. My fiddle's kind of finally coming back to life, but I've got like a ZZ over here that's going crazy that you can't really see. Yeah, no, the plants make people happy, so they're just so fun, and I love like they love the heat you're spewing. I love it. They love your energy. They grow because of your energy.
Well, I'd have to admit that there have been a few, like my, I don't know, what do they call it? A little fiddle, something like that, that fell by the wayside. And I might have had in the, under the dark of night, had to pitch it without anybody knowing. But, you know, these things happen.
They do happen. I mean, the beauty of like New York is you could leave something out like on your front door or out on the street, and like maybe someone picks up your dead plant and tries to revive it. I don't know. Things like that can happen. Like it's amazing. But I love it. I love it. Thank you for sharing that. I also like. I know we're gonna get into questions, but I also see that you're like at a standing desk, and I love that energy as well. I feel like we're like two peas in a pod right now because I'm also at my standing desk.
Well, I have to tell you, so, I think as most people, I had kind of a small desk at home that I had used, but I was really an office person. To be honest with you, I spent most of my time in the office and I didn't do that
Same.
much work at a desk at home. I mean, I had the whole setup and everything else, but really, as the pandemic continued and you realized, oh crap, I need to actually do real work here. We invested in not only a desk, but also a standing desk. And it's really just changed my life, to be honest with you. And,
Oh,
you know, with all of the choices on Amazon, it was a good investment, I would say.
all right. Well, you heard it. You heard it from Amy herself. I totally concur. But yes, to get into a little bit of your background, because I do believe that that is so critical to your success as a leader. Talk to us about your Japanese background and how that influences the lens for how you lead a fintech firm today.
It's such a good question. And I guess, to give a little bit of context would probably be helpful. So I'm a fourth generation Japanese American. My mom was born at an internment camp during World War II. My dad came out of Japan and came here when he was a young man. And I would say, as I think about my upbringing and growing up in Los Angeles, in some ways, maybe I shouldn't have been here. Maybe I shouldn't be here where I am today, leading a company, being the CEO of a company. Because to be honest with you, I didn't have role models at the time that were like who I am today. My mom was a hairstylist. My dad was an architectural draftsman. And, I think what happened was over the course of my background and thinking about the investments that my parents made in my education and making sure that I had other extracurricular activities. I don't think that they realized at the time, but all of it really shaped how I ended up at the end of the day. My mom, when I was 3.5 years old, enrolled me in Japanese classical dance. And really, I think the choice at the time was, do I want to send her to gymnastics, or do I want to send her to Japanese classical dance? And truly, her choice was, well, I'd really like to have her have some kind of a Japanese background, of a grounding of some sort. And so she sent me to these classes, and I can't recall any part of my childhood where that wasn't part of what I was doing. And this idea of then the learning that it's not kind of instant gratification. Nothing that you do in life is instant gratification. It's this idea that you invest and you grow and you're pursuing these other activities. And I ended up going to Japan to, get a professional name in Japanese classical dance and all of these other pieces.
Oh,
And
wow.
it was this idea that that is the outcome. And so pursuing these goals and thinking about that over the long term is part of, I guess, if I look back now, having the benefit of 2020 hindsight, all of those pieces kind of added up. And I would also say that this isn't necessarily related to kind of being Japanese or the Japanese American kind of background, but it is the case that I fully believe that there are people who can change the trajectory of your life as you go along, and kind of being open and accessible to thinking about those, and taking advantage of how that opens the aperture is really important. And so I just recall, somebody who came to my high school who said, Amy, you should apply to this college. And, I was in Los Angeles. Really, I should have gone to, a California UC school, or something, a Cal State school or something else. And that's where everybody else was applying to. But they had suggested something outside of that. And I was like, okay, I'll do it. And on that fluke, then kind of, I think that was one of the pieces that then changed the trajectory of my life. And then I was able to come to the East Coast and have an entirely different experience. And when I think about then, how does that influence how I lead today? It is this idea, this fundamental idea of, sometimes it's hard to be what you can't see. And part of what we have to do, right? You, me, all of us who are in this like incredibly blessed position to have access, means, resources, are to then say to some of these people who are out there today, you can do these things. Have you thought about this opportunity? Just open the door, open the aperture a little bit, so that then people can step into the spotlight and to be able to kind of like realize the potential that they have within them.
Oh gosh, and such a beautiful story, and I appreciate just how honest and reflective you've been, right, with that question. Because I did a lot of that myself throughout 2020 and the last 18 or so months, and thinking about what about my childhood or what about my upbringing has made me the way I am, right? Because for a while you kind of think like, why am I like angry, or why do I feel like I'm needing to really voice my opinion or voice these things, and create this like pathway for others to follow, right? And why do I feel this responsibility of the platform that I have? And you're exactly right. It's reflecting on those times and saying like, oh, I was kind of blessed to have these certain values or to move around a lot. I often talk about that I was I'm from California, but then I moved to Texas in my teens, where like my whole world really changed. Especially when it came to the people I was around. And so, um, yeah, but it made me who I am today. I'm so grateful for that experience, or else I don't think I would be here. I don't know if I'd have this platform or have the voice that I do, because exactly, you can't be what you can't see, or you can't acknowledge what you don't go out and try to learn about. So instead of like, I mean, as a teen, it was hard, but when I got older, instead of like being like, just I'm angry, right? You like go and try to figure out
Right.
why that is, or what it is, and then how can you turn that anger into like good and make something good for the world. And then just tell more stories, like tell more of those stories, tell more of the female stories, tell more of the stories of people with different experiences like ourselves, and give those platforms out there, because we're paving pathways, and so that's
For
amazing.
sure. For sure.
Yeah, yeah. Awesome, awesome. Well, I do want to get into some of those core values of ComplySci, that really aligned with you and made you excited to take the helm as CEO when you did.
Such a great question, and it was interesting when I came on board, about 3.5 years ago now. We had not espoused what our core values were, and we were kind of at a point where, um, you kind of felt like, oh, we know what our core values are, but when you don't put it on paper and you don't talk about it as an organization, then kind of people form their own views. And so we landed on these three core values, which I had a, a big hand in shaping. So definitely near and dear to my heart. But the first was, how can I help? The second is team before ego. And the third is hungry for more. And the first one with how can I help? It was this idea where, when I first came on board, there was this idea that we had kind of a couple of different products, and we had teams that were servicing those different products, but they really weren't collaborating together. And so if one team was crushed and the other team was not, the team that was not would go home at the end of the day and be like, see ya. And you kind of left your teammates, um,
Yeah. Oof.
at the office. And I kind of felt like, that's not really the organization, the team that I want to come to every single day. I want one where we're asking each other, how can I help? How can I help you? I see that gap. Let's fill in that gap. At the same time, we're thinking about our clients. How can I help you, the client? How can I put myself in your shoes and to think about how I can make your life more efficient, more automated? How can I help you see insights that maybe you're not seeing within the system or within, um, the ecosystem at large? And how can I provide that value to you? And really putting yourself in the position and the shoes of that other person is, really transformative. And then the second piece, which was this team before ego, was this idea that what we know for sure is that even if you have a ton of smart people in the room, if we come together in order to singularly focus on outcomes, there's nothing that we can't accomplish. And this idea that we have to kind of check ego at the door in order to do that, right? So sometimes you have discussions and you're not quite 100% on, which way we should go. But at the end of the day, if we make a decision, then you have to commit and we have to go at it. And I know that that's when we can run through walls and get everything done. The last thing, which was hungry for more, is a little bit of a funny episode, to be honest. And this is a little bit inside baseball here, but what we knew for sure was that, if we put a challenge out to the team and we said, um, hey, at the end of this, if we accomplish it, we'll have a guacamole party. When we used to be able to have guacamole parties inside of the office, we could do anything. The team would do anything. And, I think I often get these questions, because we have investors and, they're like, a guacamole, like, why would you do that? What? I don't even understand. Like, don't you do that every Friday anyways? And I
I
was
like
like,
love it.
yes, that is not the point, people. It's not the point. It's the idea that we can get there together. And, they were flabbergasted, and it's been a lot of fun. And we've found other ways to celebrate in the meantime. But in addition to that, it is this underlying fundamental idea that we need to be hungry for more. We need to be thinking about what's next, what else, how else can we top that customer service experience, or how else do we move the needle forward? How do we innovate? And this like relentless desire to move forward is kind of part of the ethos. And I'd have to admit that when we put this out there were some people who kind of came forward and say, I'm so glad you stated what the values are. And now I understand where you're going with this. And I'm really sorry, but I've got to tap out. It's not for me. And on the one hand, it's
Oh,
kind of
wow.
like, ugh, that doesn't feel good. But on the other hand, I was like, I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of like the Zappos concept, which is kind of like,
Hmm.
okay, I'm glad, we said these things, you're tapping out. We're going to find other people who then have bought into those values. And it's a core part of how we recruit people. We talk to people about it all the time, people within the organization here at town halls, ad nauseum, but it's one of these things where I think when we think about how is it that we want to operate as a group, um, it's been really incredible to just see that as part of the fabric of the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And way to go. I had someone once say to me to stick to your non-negotiables. And upholding the fabric of your values at the core of your company is a non-negotiable. And I love that you think about culture first and keeping that together. It's imperative for any business, right, to understand the needs and try to engage, and that directly connects to compliance, right, and the culture of compliance. So will you share maybe a brief overview of ComplySci and how it addresses the culture of compliance?
Sure. And, as you probably have seen, comply size, breadth and depth is growing every single day. And so I'll talk about ComplySci and how it started in this concept that we would help compliance officers within financial services think about employee risk and staying ahead of employee risk, whether it was monitoring, trading, whether it was monitoring gifts and entertainment or political contributions, that check that you write to um, uh, maybe not just a senator candidate, but also to a school board or whatever have you. All of these different pieces are part of what ultimately you're worried about from a compliance perspective in terms of thinking about the conflicts that your employees might get themselves into, board assignments, things like that as well. And so all of those things are what ComplySci has helped financial services, primarily in the past, private equity firms, hedge funds, things like that. That's the ComplySci product. Recently, we've also acquired RA in a box, which is really kind of the preeminent product within the wealth management space. And, they have an end to end solution for not just the compliance piece, but also operations and cybersecurity as well. And so it really extends the breadth of what we can do there. And then two other acquisitions that we did were NRS, which is very deep into consulting, as well as continuing education for compliance officers. And so, kind of making sure that people are on top of their game. And the last piece is Loomis, which is, kind of has a deep focus on political contribution and political contribution verification and has one of the preeminent products within that particular space. And so, why do all of this might be one of your questions. And um, not to answer all the questions that you might have, but I think part of this is this concept that if we can deliver expertise and we can deliver best of breed software and bundle that with data and insights on top of that, we can be an incredible compliance powerhouse for our CCOs and partners to them, because what we know every single day is that their life is getting more complicated, not less complicated. They probably don't have
For sure.
as many resources as they would like, or hope to have. And, you know, the fact of the matter is that if we can bundle those things together and try to provide them with that insight at the end of the day, hopefully what we can do is to put ourselves in the shoes of our client, think about how we can help and really deliver value as partners to those compliance officers.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a really awesome mission, and I love just seeing even how passionate you are about it and the growth I'm excited to see ComplySci grow. And yeah, the news of you guys acquiring Aria in a Box, I was like, whoa, because I used to heavily cover wealth management. I mean, I still kind of do, but yeah, that was a wild announcement, and just kudos and congrats. It's really an awesome thing to just keep building and growing. And I am a believer that compliance and regulation should really be at that top priority for everyone in the company, starting in the C-suite. This isn't just a compliance officer problem. Of course, that's who it's for, but like everyone should be involved in this, right? Everyone should be in on the action. And will you share maybe how ComplySci's solution really provides that 360 view of an end user, to kind of help companies navigate, right, all of these complexities. Yeah, because it's can be hard to kind of understand the best ways to measure really like the effectiveness of integrating technologies to be able to actually like provide insights, right, of like
Sure.
the,
Well,
the user.
and I'll talk about that in a couple of different ways. So, on the one hand, I think when you think about compliance and you think about kind of if you don't have a platform, what happens? Um, Certainly, when you think about monitoring trades and trading of your employees, that means that you're monitoring pieces of paper or emails that have pieces of paper in a PDF form attached to them. And there are just piles and piles of those. And you're really thinking about, okay, how do I take all of this data, which are on these pieces of paper, and ensuring that my employees are not doing something which is mostly probably not intentionally, but they might be
Hmm.
doing something that is not in the best interest of the organization and in conflict with what the organization is doing and what the policies are doing. And so there is this whole aspect of thinking about policies and procedures and whether or not your employees are actually following those policies and procedures. And so software products like the ComplySci platform allow you to then automate that entire process. Everything from being able to have your employees attest to the certifications of the policies and the conformance to the policies themselves, and to do that in a super efficient manner. I mean, just imagine you're at home, I'm at home today. Compliance officers are also at home. And so if they have 10, 20, 100, 1,000 employees to go run after all of them to try to get all of these disparate pieces, you need to have a system in place to be able to do that effectively. And so that's one whole part of it. Even just the onboarding process of a new employee and making sure that they're getting through all of the processes and policies on the onboarding process is something that, while you could do on your own on the side, it's a highly manual process. And so anything that we can do to create zero friction in that onboarding process is what we're thinking about. Then the other piece of that is then with all of these other pieces of data, how is it that you can effectively take those hundreds of thousands of pieces of data for stock trades or for otherwise, and to ensure that that's also aligning with your policies? Because not only do you need to then ensure that your employees perhaps are requesting that they do trades, but you also have to make sure after the fact that it aligns once they have actually done those trades and things like that as well. And so all of these pieces are things that presumably you could do in an Excel spreadsheet. But at some point in time, that the burden of an Excel spreadsheet becomes so massive, it is impossible to keep up and really not in line with what really the regulatory bodies are looking for in terms of having a best of breed compliance program in place and really having technology to be able to help you to fill that gap and to get there faster is a huge part of what we can deliver.
Yeah, I mean, and I imagine when a regulator does come knocking, right, to have even just for a regular checkup or exam or all the things that financial services firms go through, to be able to say, look, this is my tech provider. That does kind of give a bit of a better leverage, I imagine.
And to be able to get reports out and in a jiffy and to download them and to do all these other, I think at the end of the day we laugh about it because I think that it's kind of like, yeah, that makes sense. We should run reports out of a system and do all these
Yeah.
other things, but in order to create all of that data, ultimately it needs to go someplace and it needs to be stored, and all of the different actions within that might have been done in terms of a particular trade, and ensuring that the appropriate checks and balances have been in place. Those are all the things when we talk about, in our parlance, I'm going to get a little technical here, the audit trail of a particular action. You need to be able to deliver that to the person that's doing an audit on you, at the time. And they don't
Yeah.
really, the idea that then you're able to deliver that in an efficient manner, timely manner, that all goes to showing kind of the culture of compliance, that you're taking it seriously, is the reason why you're able to deliver stuff super quickly. And
Mhm.
so I think then when we think about the larger organizations, we're able to then also, through NRS, help people through mock audits, as an example. So oftentimes our clients will not want to wait until a regulator knocks on the door. They want to make sure in advance that they're prepared, and that they're thinking through what are the things that people could be asking for. And so, our consulting team is hard at work helping clients every single day on things that might be project based, but also ongoing work that they might be thinking about, and being partners to our clients every single day, every single month of the year, to be side by side with those clients. And then on the other side, when we think about our in a box on the wealth management side, it's an end to end solution. And when we think about cybersecurity, there's a virtual desktop solution that they just acquired earlier this year, through Itegria, which they're delivering to clients. There is email archiving and social media, monitoring, which is also being brought to bear. There's a lot. And if you just think about all of these different point solutions that our compliance officers are trying to do, they're kind of like, you can imagine somebody trying to put their fingers in all of the holes, and just trying to like keep, you know, keep from going under, because every single day there's like just another little thing that they have to monitor. And at some point it becomes really overwhelming. And so we're trying to help untangle the messiness, and to give them this breath of air so that they can have a dashboard that they're looking at across all of these pieces.
Right, and it's like we have these type of capabilities for so many other aspects of a financial service, or even just in our lives between just shopping online or whatever. Like, why can't a compliance officer have this as well, when it comes to monitoring their day to day, right? Like, we all have these tools, so to be able to give that full kind of gambit, if you will, right, of all of the things from cybersecurity to paperwork, or I guess digital paperwork, or ensuring that the boxes are all checked before, well before an exam happens with a regulator.
100%. And I think here, when you think about the arc of where we were versus where we're going, um,
Hmm.
I think for a long time people had different kinds of processes in place and things like that. And I think over time, I liken where we are in our business very much to, if I was to look at another vertical, and we think about marketing. If we look back to where HubSpot and Marketo were back in the day, like, they came onto the market, and all of a sudden it changed the face of marketing. It was the rise of the digital marketer, and using data and being able to prove ROI. And it was a different language for marketing than had been talked about before. And I think here we have the same opportunity within compliance, which is,
Hmm.
to be honest with you, many of our compliance officers who I know and I love dearly, um, many of them have to come out from a legal background, because they have to know the body of regulatory um, things that they need to understand for the purpose of their company, their employees, for third party, all of these other things. So they have to be steeped in the legal aspect of compliance. Oftentimes, they might also come out from an administrative perspective as well, especially as they're building in the ranks. And thinking about that, the thing that then is missing is that you don't often find compliance officers who were, majors in statistics or big data or any of these other things. And so I think what we're trying to do is to help bridge the gap so that we can make data easier for people.
Oh gosh. Bless. I feel like you should you be a content creator too? Should you like do what I do? Should you just like Did you go around and like, preach the good gospel that is like, I can build a compliance fintech that makes it just as interesting as like marketing? Should you
To
like do
be
that? Because
honest,
I mean, frankly,
to be honest with you, so we launched something at ComplySci, which is called the CCO Spotlight. And this is
oh,
part
fun.
of being a content creator, but really more because I just truly believe that putting our CCOs into the spotlight to be able to shine the amazing work that they're doing, but also
Awesome.
the trajectory. If you think about kind of the history, a chief compliance officer position really hasn't been around for terribly long. And it's not like you could go to school in the past to become a chief compliance officer. They didn't even, it was just, so you get the gist. And so these people have had these very interesting backgrounds to get to become the CCO. And how do you become a, you know, a super CCO who's really outperforming and who's driving value for your organization? And I think that part of it is that CCOs oftentimes, or compliance administrators who are thinking about how do they become a CCO are really wondering, okay, how do I make my position more strategic? And thinking about how they can help the business grow and be strategic to the business. And it's one of those things where oftentimes allowing a venue for them to one learn about each other. So I have advisory boards where I bring people together in a closed group and they're able to share their perspectives on, typically it's not about ComplySci, to be honest with you. It's about other things that are other topics that are issues that are important amongst the team. But then it's also just telling their stories, just like you're asking me, because I think it's often a mystery. How do you become a CCO? The path is not something that a lot of people have had. And so I think you have a lot of people who are thinking like, oh, it's super interesting. There's this GC path, the general counsel path, which I think has been forward for a really long time, and people understand how to do that. But how is it that you become a CCO, and how do you become an effective CCO who's strategic in an organization? And that's something that I think shouldn't be a mystery, and we should celebrate those people who've been really successful.
Yeah, and they shouldn't operate in a silo, right?
For
Like it isn't
sure.
just like, oh, well, compliance goes and does that thing and that's cool and I don't really know as the CEO what's going on. Glad he or she just does the thing and that's great. But I love the part of you saying compliance officers being a part of the strategic growth because I do think it can be maybe like misconstrued as like I said, right? Like, oh, just the compliance officer does the one thing. Make sure we don't F up for the lack of a better word. And that's it, like, and then it's like the end, and but to actually have them a part of the future, right, a part of the growth of and finding ways and leveraging data and leveraging the technology we have to have them involved and engaged in a different way. I mean, you're just going to demystify a lot about compliance and the space, and even just like getting more headlines and more content around compliance is really really cool. And I if anyone's gonna make compliance, as sexy as marketing, it's gonna be Amy. Um, and I'll be here to see it happen and to see it play out because that is going to be so cool. I mean, speaking of making like compliance, I guess like cool and interesting and digitizing it. Employees do need to understand the reasons why compliance measures are taken and the company needs to make it easy for the employee to comply and understand. I know you have a mobile implementation to address this. How exactly does that work and how does that kind of maybe keep employees engaged with the compliance
Sure.
side?
Well, I mean, I think that, you're right. To a certain extent, from an employee perspective, oftentimes compliance is like, ugh. I don't
That's like the still. I'm gonna steal from the. That's exactly right.
it's this thing where it's like, oh, I have to do the thing, and oh, they want me to do this other thing, and a lot of um a lot of it is, kind of sadly unappreciated from an employee
Yeah.
perspective because sometimes they say that compliance officers, they have a lot of sticks, but not necessarily a lot of carrots. And um, so I think that when we put ourselves in the perspective of the user. So, like I said before, when we talk about how can I help and putting ourselves in the shoe of the other person, it's not just the compliance officer's shoe that we have to put ourselves in, it's also the employee shoe. How is it that when I'm out and I'm about, like, oh crap, I'm about to go have a dinner and I didn't disclose that. How do I do this? How can I do this easier? How can I think about that less? How can I make this frictionless? That's the basic concept behind all of this, which is that if you can make something frictionless, if you can think about how to make something easier, um, then employees will have less resistance ultimately to doing those things. And we've seen kind of time and time again as clients have come over to our system and I've never actually, this is true story, I've never
Mhm.
actually been at an organization where I had a colleague, we're at a conference, an end user, not a compliance person, but an end user came and gave him a hug, saying that they were so happy to be on ComplySci, versus their prior system. And I mean, I worked at
That's
a lot
awesome.
of companies and that's never happened. But I think that this idea of, when you think about the software and you think about what is the user experience, it's so important not just to think about kind of the specific person who might be the buyer persona, right? The compliance officer, but also you need to think about who else is going to use your product. All of those end users, they just need it to be super simple. And, you know, the KISS method is definitely here. Keep it super, keep it simple, stupid, or keep it yes, 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 yes. I always analogies are terrible, by the way, and I keep trying to use sports analogies, and I'm really not a sports person, and so they often go awry somewhere in the middle. But I keep trying. All I can do.
Gotta find some, like, Japanese dance analogies instead.
The problem is that people don't get that
No one's
so much.
gonna know them.
Yeah, people don't get it.
Hmm.
But I mean, we can try. We'll try to incorporate for sure.
Right, exactly. Amazing. I also want to talk a little bit about ComplySci and its, big M&A activity. Now, 3 acquisitions this year. We have talked about it. I know, like she's so excited about it. I love it. And I know that there's a big picture strategy here, and I've heard you talk about it a little bit, but for our listeners, just getting to know you. What are you? I know what you're building out. You're building out, like the best and compliance tech provider out there, right? You're building a holistic system that does all of the things for you or for the compliance officer. But when it comes to kind of making these decisions and building and buying and who to buy and all that good stuff, how is that? What are those like internal healthy debates like? I know
Oh,
you've,
there's
you've
so many
explained it to me
debates.
like that. Healthy
How
debates.
much time do we have in this podcast? No, I think it's always the question, right? So as we think about it, so if I start with what have we seen this year since I've been in the CEO seat,
Hmm.
we have been just so lucky. I can't, be thankful enough for the kind of confidence people have shown in our organization. Starting with, we had an incredible slate of investors previously with Vista Equity Partners, who I think everybody in private equity knows, and
Yeah.
Edison Partners and who had been early investors in ComplySci. And in June of this year, K1 Investment Management was able to invest in us and became our lead investor. And you can read the press release and whatever else it is, but it was a sizable investment, and just this idea of an investment in ComplySci as a platform to be able to then grow in this reg tech space, and the idea that the belief was that not only the trajectory that we were on, and we've been very lucky this year in terms of continued outpaced growth, and so I can't complain.
Yeah, right. And by sizable, I'm pretty sure you mean 120 million or something like that. But I do appreciate your
Something
modesty.
like that.
She's like, it's like a little 120
You know, um,
million.
and and then the continued investment in our organization in the belief as we grow, because I think that, there are some investors who could have said, okay, let's continue to have you grow organically and everything that you do has to be built. I think that what I found with K1 and the continued just support from Vista and Edison was that we had this bigger idea. We had this bigger idea that if we wanted to build out this end-to-end solution and think about all of the different pieces that a compliance officer faces, whether it's corporate compliance, whether it's employee compliance, whether it's third-party compliance, we needed to think bigger and more broadly.
Hmm.
And luckily, we found some great partners who also believed in the dream, and have then put their money where their mouth is, and have allowed us to go out and acquire 3 companies in kind of 2 months.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's
That is
kind of
crazy, and
nuts.
that it's a.
Did they really let me?
She's having epiphany pokes.
They're like, did they let me do this? Oh my god, someone's gonna find me out.
Is this allowed? Can this happen? Um, I mean, yes, it can when you're good at what you do and you know what you're doing. And so I'm excited to see how all of this pans out and like see you guys grow and see all of the acquisitions come together. It's super exciting. I
At
mean,
the same time,
is
let's be clear. I know we have to deliver, right? At the end of the day, we need to deliver on the promise and all of those other things for our clients. And we're not doing this just for fun, but I think it is this: how do we deliver on the promise that we thought of, which is how is that we think about really delivering innovation and outpace growth and, kind of more benefit to our clients in the market. Otherwise, why do it?
right, exactly, exactly. And I am such a fan of what you're building and what you're doing here. I mean, looking ahead or looking back or both. What is maybe the is there like an initiative, a proud moment, an area of focus that like you're most excited about or most proud of, in the last year or even just like looking ahead?
I mean, there are so many times when, kind of like to your point, I was just like, oh my God, I've got to kind of pinch myself a little bit.
Hmm.
So I've just been, and I think there's a mantra that you have to work hard to be lucky, like
Yeah.
fundamentally, right? So when we go
Yeah.
all the way back to your first question, part of what we've learned is that you have to work hard to be lucky and put yourself in a position to have those great things happen. But if I was to think about, cycle through all the different things that happened, it's not about the acquisitions, it's not about the investment or whatever else it is. It was actually um, this turning point with a client where, and it's kind of the reason why you do this every single day, which is when we think about this client. This client, I think, proceeded when I had come on board and was, I guess I would say, a disgruntled client. And
Hmm.
kind of I was put onto this project and kind of like, okay, Amy, you have to go figure out how to fix this problem. It was
Hmm.
like, oh my God, okay, how do we do this? Like, let's dig in. And I think what happened over time, and over the course of the last 2 3 years, was working side by side as partners with this client, and to think about, okay, what are all the things that we need to do in order to make this right and to make this work for both sides. And I think when we had done a prior renewal, it was pretty contentious, to be honest with you. And I wasn't sure if they would continue with us. But nonetheless, we continued to kind of put
Hmm.
in the work and to think about what are those
Right.
things that make sense, not just for them, but for our clients at large. Because part of it is to then learn and think about kind of what is that we can take back from this kind of exchange in order to then make us better overall. And I'm happy to report that just a couple weeks ago, they signed a 5-year renewal.
Wow.
And
Wow.
in
See?
in this kind of environment, right, where tech is like changing every single day, for someone to be like, I'm going to sign a 5-year deal with you,
Yeah, it's
it's
huge.
kind of like, shit, we just did something right, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I mean, what an aha moment, right?
yeah, and and I think that it's not perfect, right? I think that still just this hungry for more concept of like, that's not enough. That's not going to be enough for us. We still need to shine and to deliver more and to think about how else we can help that client and all of our other clients. But I think there are those moments when I think about why is it that we do this every single day? Why do we pour our hearts into these organizations? It is that. It is those moments where you're like, wow, if you just put one foot in front of the other and we continue to build on that, we're able to then come out to some pretty amazing outcomes at the end of the day.
Yeah. Oh, wow. What an amazing story and just an example of right, turning the tables. I think far too often we see a disgruntled user doesn't always end up right, but to be able to literally like turn them around and sign a 5 year deal is like wild. And you clearly have, some awesome, just like kind of sasson, if you will, to be able to do that, right? But I also think that it speaks to and you also mentioning that the tech landscape is changing so fast for them to sign a 5 year deal is like wow. But I think what's more important is that, and what we sometimes forget in the tech world is that people want to work and consume and get their tech or sign a 5 year deal with someone that they trust, with a company that's led by someone that they trust, or and has employees with someone that they trust and that they relate to and can understand them. Like, think about it, because you put the effort into turning the tables with them and changing their mind. How telling is that? Like, to be like, yeah, we care and we're gonna do what it takes to like show you that we care. I'm here now. Yeah, I got my team now. Like, let's do this, whatever it takes.
Yeah.
Like, things are different now. And so that just takes like such an amazing level of leadership on your part and just the team that you have to do that. And, it's like, whoever thought that like compliance could feel so, nice and warm and emotional almost a little bit, right? But like it can. And so that's so cool that to do that. And so kudos to you. And, yeah, big fan, even more so after talking to you for this time. The last thing I want to get into is inclusion and representation. That is super important to me and my content here at One the Fintech. Obviously, it's no shock that women are still so underrepresented in the fintech landscape, especially in C-suite roles and CEO roles like yourself. So I'd love to just hear from you as an industry leader, someone in that seat, how you're kind of ensuring that progress is going forward in terms of that equity in your own day to day.
Such a great question. And it's one of those things that, I think everybody struggles with, even if you're a woman who's a CEO.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily mean that all of a sudden, like, voila, it all happened. It just doesn't, it's just not like that. And so I think here, then when we think about how do you do that on an active basis, it is this question of thinking about your executive team. It's thinking about the teams below that. Who do you hire? And so I've had the incredible joy to hire, you know, an incredibly diverse team, both in terms of ethnic backgrounds, but then also in terms of women specifically. I have a CFO, a CMO, a head of people and services, all of whom are women. It's about a 50-50 split. If we think
It's
about
awesome.
my board, I've got two of the four outside board members are women. I've got, there's just a huge amount of representation everywhere. And that's just been important to me. And I've been pretty outspoken about that with
Yeah.
not just my own team, but also with my board members, my investors. It was one of those things where um, it's just been incredibly important overall. And I think that then investing in how is it that we ensure that you're out there in terms of being able to recruit new people. And what I really do find, to be honest with you, is that having people on the C suite or as the CEO, we've just had people come to us and raise their hand. And I think it's the power of representation. And so when other organizations come to me and they ask, like, how do I do that? And I was like, well, I mean, I think that you need to take a step and magic will start to happen because I think, I've had people who have been in our process and they've had incredibly competitive offers from multiple, employers and things like that. And they've told me, like, I had an opportunity to go to these other places, but I chose ComplySci because of these things, because of the fact that I see diversity on the management team. I see diversity in the boardroom. And I've never had that. I just had a board meeting earlier this month, and one of my C suite members was like, I've got to tell you, I didn't realize this before, but I have never been at a board meeting where I wasn't the only woman. And I was like, that's another like moment. It's
Ugh.
like,
It so is. Yeah.
I'm so sad. I'm so sad for them. But I
Yeah.
know that that was also me for a long time as well, in terms of other roles that I have been in. And, part of it is that trying to make your own way and making your impact as you can. And I don't know. So it's one of those things that's continued. I know that I've been the benefactor of so many people who have taken a chance on me to give me stretch positions or to do all of these other things. And it's not necessarily a woman, it could also be a man. Many of my mentors have been
Yeah,
men who
absolutely.
have like plucked me out of nowhere to be able to give me these other opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think putting yourself in a position to be able to be seen is part of that overall. But as a senior person, your choices matter, and realizing that is important.
Absolutely. Tone at the top. And, I applaud you and all of the great work that you are doing and having, owning your seat and owning it so well. It paves pathways and it allows for some footsteps for, even to someone like myself to follow in, right? Or any, young girl or any woman, honestly, listening to this, like we said before, right? You got to see it to be it sometimes. And when you see someone in that role that looks like you, that feels like you think, all right, like I can do that too.
For
Like,
sure.
hell yeah, I can do anything. And so that's so sick. And I'm so glad that that woman got to have that opportunity to sit in a boardroom where she wasn't the only one. I know I get tired of being the only one too. It's exhausting. So that's awesome. That's so awesome. I love that, and I appreciate everything that you're doing. I know that maybe my one of my last questions for you would be, I do like to ask about imposter syndrome. I know a lot of my listeners, that's something that maybe they feel when they are in their own C-suite roles, and whether you're a man or a woman, you can feel these things. So how do you kind of keep your own mental health in check?
Such a great question. And I think what I have learned over the years in a couple of different scenarios is that it's not just women who have imposter syndrome. Men have the same kinds of fears, they just may not manifest them in the same way. And um, older people, younger people, everybody has their own set of anxiety and stress. And so when you realize that, I went to business school, and one of the women who was at business school, because I was like, oh, like all of you have so much experience. I'd done 2 years out of undergrad, and then I went to business school. And so I had peers who had 5 years of experience, 6 years of experience, and they were at business school. And so I was feeling like, oh my God, what do I have to bring to the table? And I had this truly aha moment with her where she was just like, hey, turning the tables, by the way, you're like the young gun blazing a trail. I'm like, oh crap, this person's going to take over my job, and I was like, oh my God, I
Yeah.
never thought about it from that way. And so I think everybody's got their own thing and that they're trying to overcome in their different perspectives. And so I think recognizing that you might have anxiety or stress about certain things, but then I think that the other part of it is then finding how you can bring your best self. And so it's this funny thing. So I've done like, a lot of work with different kinds of coaches and done assessments over time and all these other things. But one of the things that I have come to realize is that you need to figure out how to ground yourself, and thinking about mental health in different ways. What I found for myself is that there is this concept of, like, if I can spend an hour a day getting to work out or to do something, and one of my favorite workouts is Soul Cycle. So this idea of being in a dark room, maybe with a bunch of other people, but I love music, I love to dance. Sometimes I like to impromptu karaoke alongside spinning.
We might be the same person then.
But but it is literally the 1 hour a day that I'm
Yep.
not thinking about anything else except for praying that I finish the class and that I live after the class. And
Yeah.
literally that time draining your brain of all of the other noise really has allowed me to then, you often find that then it's like the idea that, like, the spark that comes out after that, or you're able to
Yep.
come and be your best self to a meeting or to a podcast or whatever have you. And so, like, this morning I had no time. I was like, I've been going since I don't know when, but I was like, I need to spend a little bit of time. So I did a 30-minute class this morning, and it was just enough. It was one with one of my favorite instructors, to be able to then say, okay, like, I'm grounded
Yeah,
and I can get through the whole
exactly.
day. And I think finding what that is for every person is so important, because if you can't give to yourself, if you can't think about your mental health, if you can't kind of do all of that, you can't give to your family, you can't give to your business. At some point it becomes a downward spiral. And
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
I encourage that for the entire team, and it's different for everybody how that happens. For some people it's like knitting, and then I get the benefit.
Yeah, whatever that spark of happiness
Yeah,
is,
exactly. And
or that thing where you get lost in something,
exactly.
to get lost into something else that, like, just isn't work. Yeah, it means a lot
Yeah.
to your mental health and happiness.
So what is
I
yours? I know. I know you're supposed to be
I
doing the questions, but
like, while you were saying that, I was like, "Are we the same person?" So I am a big cycler as well. I used to go to Soul Cycle classes, before the pandemic. Now I'm a Peloton gal. But I used to be really, into, like, getting literally lost in, like, 45 minutes of just, like, me and the Stairmaster. Like,
yes.
me and Stairmaster, like, let me just and I would put my music on. I love music too, and I would just, like, lose myself in that almost, like, challenge, right? And be
Right.
like, I can do this. And when you get through something like that, you're just like, the rest of this day is nothing. Like, what's this? Nothing. But also yoga, power yoga has been huge for me. When the world shut down, so I could do something like in a tiny bedroom.
Right.
So yeah, so now I've been really into the power yoga, and it does, even just having like 30 seconds of, laying down after the end of the session. Yeah, and being one with yourself and letting the noise go is so important. So I love that you encourage that. So much fun. I also like to dance too. I was also a dancer. I told you we're the same person. But anyways, like, it's a little whoa. We got a lot of common anyway, but which is good for me.
And then I think at some
That
point we're
my future is bright.
yeah, I think we're going to do another podcast where we're cooking, although I don't know really how to cook. I don't
Oh
know other than you.
yes,
But
yes, we're gonna do a cooking and compliance podcast. Stay tuned. That's coming next time. So excited for that one. That one's gonna be fun. I want to add an activity to this podcast eventually. Like, yeah, like make it more interactive. But remind me of that one. We're gonna cook Filipino food. I'm gonna learn some Japanese cuisine. It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be killer.
exactly.
But anyways, I will. We are wrapping up this episode. I will ask you your final thoughts, Amy. Please tell us what the f we can expect from you and ComplySci next.
Well, I think that you can tell from all of the actions in the last year that I might be just a little bit bold. And so I can't tell you exactly what's coming in our future, but in terms of the idea here is really to bring these organizations together and to continue to think about huge innovations that we can bring to market to make our compliance officers' lives better, to make them breathe easier, sleep better at night, and to truly be their partners, and in this journey. And um, hopefully, I'll be back the next time with the next bold news.
Yeah. Oh, you will be. You definitely will be. I've never had more fun talking about compliance. I can't believe it. I mean, and you all will have so much fun listening when you get to this part of the end of the episode. I am so excited about this one. This is so cool. But that is a wrap on this episode of What the FinTech. Thank you again so much, Amy, for joining us and for your authenticity and your honesty. It was such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Yes. And thank you as well to our listeners for tuning in. If you loved this episode, be sure to hit that subscribe or follow button. And you can find me on all your favorite podcast platforms. Until next time, talk to you soon.